guys, it is April from Getting Hugo with It. So I did it again. I went book shopping and I went crazy. So I'm splitting up my October book haul into two parts again. So this is part one. It's funny because my thumbnails, they always look so reserved. Like it looks like I showed restraint. But in reality, I have so many books here that I couldn't even attempt to hold them up. That would just be ridiculous. So let me show you the books I got. So the first book that I got is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. Now, I have seen this so many times and everyone seems to have raved about it. There was something about it that I just didn't want to read. But time after time, people would just rave about how much they love this book that I was finally just like, well, I guess I have to. I guess I have to buy it. And when I saw it on sale for like $2, I just caved and did it. So The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo is about a Hollywood movie icon, Evelyn Hugo, and her many, many husbands and her many, many lives. And I think it's meant to be a kind of biography of her life, if I'm not mistaken. So I am looking forward to it. A lot of people that I trust on BookTube really loved this, so I'm just gonna go for it. I was also so excited to find The Wasp Factory by Ian Banks. This is meant to be a very scary horror book. So this is about a murderer and you read it from his perspective, and there's just a little quote on the back I wanted to share with you. 2 years after I killed Blythe, I murdered my young brother Paul for quite different reasons than I disposed of Blythe, and then a year after that I did for my young cousin Esmeralda, more or less on a whim. That's my score to date. 3. I haven't killed anybody for years and don't intend to ever again. It was just a stage I was going through. Yes. Just all sorts of yes. This actually, I'm just so excited about this one. This one might land in the Dying to Read book club. So if you haven't joined, this one might happen. I also picked up The Aftermath by Rydian Brooke, and I have heard so many good things about this, and I have looked for this so many times, and I saw it at a library sale. Good old library sales. I was so happy, and it's in wonderful condition. So this takes place in Hamburg in 1946, and this takes place after the Second World War, where the city is completely in shambles, and there is this British occupied zone where thousands of Germans have been ushered from their homes and they're just walking through the streets basically. They don't have anywhere to live exactly. And we follow Colonel Lewis Morgan, and he's in charge of overseeing the rebuilding of this city. And he's stationed at this house and he just can't bring himself to kick the Germans that live there out of this house. And instead, he insists that his family and this family live together, I believe. What would that even be like? Doesn't that sound absolutely fascinating? I'm very excited about The Aftermath. Okay, so this next one I totally bought on a whim. It's called When She Woke by Hilary Jordan. So this is meant to be a modern day retelling of The Scarlet Letter. It seems a bit of a dystopian sci-fi kind of vibe. So let me just read a little bit of the blurb. Hannah Payne's life has been devoted to church and family, but after she's convicted of murder, she awakens in a new body to a nightmarish new life. She finds herself lying on a table in a bare room covered only by a paper gown, with cameras broadcasting her every move to millions at home, for whom observing new criminals whose skin color has been genetically altered to match the class of their crime, is a sinister form of entertainment. Hannah is a red for the crime of murder. The victim says the state of Texas was her unborn child, and Hannah is determined to protect the identity of the father, a public figure with whom she shared a fierce and forbidden love. It also sounds a bit Handmaid's Tale-esque. So I am kind of eager to read this, and I really like the color. It's like metallic red Sounds cool. This one is another gamble. I picked up You Came Back by Christopher Koch, and this is about a man whose son has died. And years after it, like, his life has changed. He is now divorced. And years after, someone moves into the home that he lived in with his wife and his son before his son passed away. And this woman who's moved into it seems to have seen his son, Brendan, and she finds this man and is like, I think I'm seeing your son in my home. And it's about their relationship together. I'm kind of imagining that it will be a ghost story, but more of a family tragedy kind of story. I'm not expecting scariness at all from this book, but more just, I don't know, like a heart-wrenching storyline. So we'll see. I also picked up Lost at Sea, the Jon Ronson Mysteries. Now, poor Jon Ronson, every time I say his name, I always call him Ron Johnson, and he's probably gotten that his entire life. But it always makes me feel bad and confused. In any case, I will always read anything that Jon Ronson has written. And this one is interesting. He kind of dives into the strange things we're willing to believe in, from lifelike robots programmed with our loved ones' personalities, to indigo children, to hyper-successful spiritual healers, to the insane clown posse's juggalo fans. Insane clown posse's juggalo fans. So I feel like this is more of like a story compilation of various topics in the nonfiction world, and I love him. I think that his writing is really smart. He's funny and very thoughtful and reflective, and I just love him. So I found that. I'm still looking for the psychopath test. I've looked everywhere. So far, haven't found it, but I will. You know me, I will. I also picked up The Polished Hoe by Austin Clarke. And this is a Giller Prize winner and also is one of my sister's very favorite books of all time. I had this book on my shelves of hers, and it was like a signed copy. I had it for years, and she thought she had lost it, and I was that horrible sister who had stolen her books and not even read them. How rude. So anyway, I bought my own copy of this, and this is such an interesting one because it is about a woman who confesses to a murder, and she has confessed to the murder of a man named Mr. Belfields, and he is the manager of the sugar plantation that she has worked at for many, many years, I think 30 years, and she confesses to this murder. I think it opens up with her taking her statement and confessing, and the sergeant has actually loved this woman for a very long time, so that adds a little extra complication. I'm very eager to read it. I also picked up The Girls in the Garden by Lisa Jewell. I have had this in my hand several times at the little bookshop around the corner from me, and just every time I've been like, well, no, I'll just get this other one. And finally, I just caved and I picked it up. And this is a thriller about a little community where there are apartment buildings, and they all like face this internal garden, so nobody else can really get in. It's only accessible to the people who live in this building. And one day there are two little girls playing in there, and one of them, Grace, is found lying unconscious and bloody in a hidden corner of a lush rose garden. What happened to her? I would love to know. It sounds really interesting, and just the way of living like that. It sounds beautiful and also really scary if one of your neighbors like wanted to hurt one of your kids. Oh God, it sounds interesting. I also picked up The House I Loved by Tatiana de Rosnay. I read Sarah's Key and really enjoyed it. I know it's not everyone's cup of tea. There were some, setbacks or like, I don't know, some cons to it for sure in her writing. But this one just sounded really good. This takes place in France, Paris in particular, in the 1860s. So hundreds of houses are being destroyed across the city because of Napoleon III. And he is basically restructuring everything and renovating this whole area. And it's going to destroy years and years and years of architecture. And so we meet Rose, who's determined to fight this because she really wants to stay in her family home. She has lost her husband as well. So as the city around her is being changed, she is like sticking it out in her home and is writing letters to her late husband. I just think this is going to be heartbreaking. And I really liked Sarah's Key, so I'm going in for another Tatiana de Rosnay. I received Endurance, A Year in Space, A Lifetime of Discovery by Scott Kelly. And I was sent this by Penguin Random House Canada. And I'm really eager to read this. I love space, anything to do with space. I just find it so fascinating. And so Scott Kelly, his twin brother, is married to Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords, who was shot. She was shot while Scott Kelly was in space, and he'd been in space for 2 months. And so he explores like all of the feelings that he had when that was going on, and you just want to be there for your brother at that time, and his wife, of course. He also just talks about his experience aboard the International Space Station, and that just sounds very interesting to me. This has just come out. It came out on October 15th, so if you're interested at all in space stuff, go and pick it up. It sounds awesome. I also picked up The Romanov Sisters by Helen Rappaport. I have been wanting to read this for a very long time. I'm really glad that I know very little about the Romanov family. They are Russian royal family. These 4 Grand Duchesses were essentially like the Prince Dianas of their day. So there was Olga, Tatiana, Maria, and Anastasia. And I think they led very glamorous lives until they didn't. I think they met very, very disturbing and sad ends. And I really want to know what happened to them. They were the daughters of Nicholas and Alexandra, and I know that those two had a very big, sweeping love story. I don't know anything more about them either, but I just think that this is going to be an interesting one. So I got that. I also got The Rebel Wife by Taylor M. Polites. Polites? I have no idea. But I got this because there was a blurb on the back from Kathleen Grissom, who wrote The Kitchen House, which you know I adore. And Kathleen Grissom said, "The Rebel Wife takes us to the time when one who suffered through the Civil War was left to sort through the debris in order to start again. The story hums with suspense. More great discussion for the book clubs." So it sounds really interesting. And this follows Augusta Bransom, who was born into antebellum Southern nobility during a time of wealth and prosperity, but now that's all gone. And her husband dies of this mysterious blood plague, and it starts running rampant in her town. So not only has she lost all of her wealth, but she's also losing all of these people around her, and she has to adjust. And that sounds really interesting. I also picked up Karen Slaughter's Cop Town. I love Karen Slaughter. She is like one of the grittiest thriller writers I've ever read. I still have only read Pretty Girls, but my god, that packs a punch. And this is another standalone of hers about a female cop named Kate Murphy. She's on the first day of her job, and she starts to find out that there is someone killing all of these cops. And she needs to find the serial killer and bring him to justice. It just sounds so good. So those were the books that I picked up in the first half of October. I'm going to film the second half for you, and you'll have that really soon. Have you read any of those books? I would love to know your thoughts on them, and I'll see you next time. Okay, bye!